Welcome to the Everyday Saint podcast, brought to you by Cedar Fort Publishing and Media. Here, we meet with authors who share highlights of their latest book and the backstory to its creation. I'm your host, Richard Bernard. Join us as we delve into Anjilee Ferguson's captivating journey through love, dating, marriage, divorce, and, well, you'll have to read the book of this cliffhanger. In this podcast, she shares her inspiring story and the valuable lessons she has learned along the way. Get ready to be uplifted and gain a fresh perspective on life. Tune in now to hear her powerful message of resilience and positivity. Now, here's Anjilee.
Yes.
I've pushed the record button in case I forget.
Sounds good.
When you had a podcast, did you ever forget to push the record?
Yes, I did. And then, I had to stop and be like, oh, hey, let's redo this a little bit.
One friend of mine, that he does the Cultural Hall podcast, Richard, he said he did a whole interview with some famous guy, and at the very end he realized he hadn't been recording.
Oh, no, that's
so
the worst.
He said, luckily that there was somebody filming there, and they happened to have their mic on, so it saved him.
Oh, good.
Well, I'm anxious to talk about your book. Now, what we're going to do, we're really two podcasts here. The first one is for Cedar Fort, and we're just going to talk about your book.
Okay.
And that may go 15 minutes, it may go 20 minutes, it may go half hour. We'll see how long it goes. Okay. And then we'll take like a minute or two break, and then we're going to record for the podcast I do, The Busy Latter-day Saint. That podcast, we're going to talk more about you, but we're also going to talk about your book. Okay, and then somehow we always manage to get into the scriptures and how you study the scriptures. Okay, and then that podcast ends with your testimony.
Okay.
If that's all right, if that's okay with you. And that podcast ends with some music by Marvin Goldstein in the background as you're starting to bear your testimony. And it ends with that silence. That music just fades away because it's a spiritual high of the podcast, and I'm not about to come on and say, give me now a 5-star rating.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I take care of all that in the beginning. So that's what we'll do. And usually this runs an hour, sometimes less. Okay. And I'm just very casual. I do have your manuscript here in front of me, and I have read it. Well, I should say I've read it, at least 90% of it. But we'll get into that because I was really surprised what this book was about. And you can tell I'm not a young person. And let's see, I was married 38 years. My wife died, and now I'm in my 17th year.
Wow.
And so kind of hard to identify with your book.
Yeah, that's fair.
But there is something that we do identify with. So we'll just have a moment of silence and we'll begin. And by the way, your name is pronounced Anjilee?
Anjilee, yes.
Anjilee, okay.
And also, I did notice, I don't see that it's showing that it's recording anywhere, just so you know.
It's recording on my end.
Oh, it is. Okay. It didn't show on my end, so I just wanted to make sure.
I use audio hijacked.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
And so it's, as you talk, it's showing that
okay, good deal. I just didn't know if it was through Zoom, and I was like, no.
No, but I appreciate that. Now, I have two last names for you. But the book says Ferguson. Yes. And then I got an email from Cedar Fort, and there was another name.
Yeah, that was my previously married name. So now it is Ferguson.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure that I got it right. Now, for Cedar Fort, all I do is I send them the audio. I have no idea when they're going to actually publish it.
Okay.
For me, I do it every 2 weeks, and I have a few people lined up, so yours will come out probably in the middle of May somewhere. But when mine comes out, I text you.
Okay.
And I also provide you a link. So there
awesome.
we go. But that podcast has been going on for 3 years now.
That's awesome.
Now, what podcast did you do?
It was called The Thing About School. So my business partner and I had started an online school for grades
Okay.
6 through 12.
I remember that in the book
Um,
now. Okay.
yeah, and so we also started a podcast just to talk about like school and education topics and raise awareness about the services we offered for parents. So
Oh, okay.
did
Very
that for a
good.
little while. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll have a moment of silence and we'll begin. Anjilee, welcome to Cedar Fort. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I've been anxious to talk about this book because I'm wondering how it applies to me, but we're going to talk about that. Now, but first of all, where are you? Are you in Utah or are you someplace outside?
I am in Utah, yes, near the
Okay.
Salt Lake area.
Oh, Salt Lake area. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
we're building a home up in North Ogden, so I guess we'll be moving up toward your area.
There you go. Nice.
Well, you have a book that came out, and it's called Yes, comma, No, comma, Maybe So. And it was an interesting title, and when I was sent this manuscript from Cedar Fort, I go, what is this about? And so I started reading it, and I read the introduction, and I see you got a lot of chapters here. You got you call them episodes, and
Yeah,
I think that's a proper fit rather than chapters, because this book it's like I'm watching a play. and I think the audience will understand how that's going on as we go a little bit further. But you've got 24 episodes, and as I started reading it and the book, in fact, instead of me telling you what I think the book's about, why don't you give us just a summary, and then I want to get into some of those episodes.
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, really the inspiration behind it and why they are episodes is because for so long with my dating history, I would have friends and family say, holy cow, your life could be a sitcom. And so I kind of took that to heart and started writing down some of my dating experiences and what I learned from them, some of the horror stories and all of that. And then it kind of just evolved into, this sitcom. And so the book is basically my dating journey from, high school to getting married the first time and then experiencing a divorce and being remarried. And so just kind of follows that journey of the highs and lows, the emotions and what I learned along the way. So that's kind of the gist of the book.
Well, you're a talented storyteller.
Well,
And
thank you.
I know you didn't make this up, but I just kept wanting to read and read because I was looking for the apex, and anyway, I was looking for how's this going to end. It's almost like I'm reading a mystery novel. I'm looking, okay, who actually killed who,
Right.
and so, but I'm looking here at the first episode. It says fairy tales. They all end the same, right? And then you talk about how you grew up watching sitcoms.
Yeah.
Yeah, your family enjoyed sitcoms, Friends, for example, and all of those sitcoms. And so you feel that your life really fits in there. And as you just said, your friends were going, my goodness, this. And of course, you love the romance comedies.
Yep. Good old rom-com.
Yeah,
Yep.
and so yours you seem to do well with that. So anyway, I'm going to get back here to where the chapters are. You talk about why am I the ugly stepsister?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. And that's episode
Yeah.
6, by the way.
Yeah, so as I was kind of thinking of, titles for these episodes, I kind of played off of the idea of, rom-coms, fairy tales, and there's always that stigma of like, oh, they're the ugly stepsister. They're the one that's never getting asked out, or they're the ones that's not included in the group or whatever. And so I just thought that was a phrase that paralleled my dating experience pretty well because I was always kind of the outsider, the friend, the one that they never really saw as a dating prospect. And so I was like, man, what is wrong with me? Like, I'm just this, one that they're never going to ask out because I just don't have that dating potential is kind of part of what that was.
And do I remember correctly, you went to BYU?
I did not. I actually went to Utah State. I went to the other
State.
blue school.
Okay,
That's
you
what
went
I
to
say.
the other blue school. Okay, I was trying to
Yes.
remember BYU or okay. So
Yeah,
yeah, and it's difficult because there's a lot of church members at that university,
there are. Yes, there are.
and they all think that
Not
you
as
should,
much as BYU,
no,
but
but
yeah.
and they all think that you should be married by age 19 and have at least 3 children.
Yep, very true. And that was not me. So
Yeah, and so what did you graduate in?
so I have a degree in journalism from
Okay.
Utah State.
All right.
So
And so you went to university, and what happened after you graduated from there?
yeah, so I actually graduated college pretty young because I was a summer birthday. And so I graduated high school at 17. And then by the time I graduated college, I was 20.
Okay.
And so after that, I was kind of like, well, what's next?
Marriage.
I've already finished. Right. Yeah.
Marriage.
So marriage it was the next logical step. But for me, I was like, I wasn't dating anybody. And I had always kind of had a desire to serve a mission. And so I thought, maybe I'll serve a mission. This was back when the age was 21. So it wasn't so out there. And so then I ended up going on a mission. And that was the next step for me.
Okay. And then you came back from your mission, and within 2 months you were married.
No, actually.
No. Oh, okay. Well, I keep
Definitely like 6 years later then I was married.
I keep hoping, that at that point you got married. Well, you've got interesting episodes here, and of course another one is What's Wrong with Me.
Yep.
And so, about how old were you about that time?
That was probably around when I was like 25, 26 and
Okay.
thinking, wow, everybody around me is getting married. And I had cousins that were getting married younger than me. Family members had all been married younger than me. My brother was married. And so I thought, oh gosh, like I really got to make this happen because what's wrong with me? Everybody else seems to be figuring it out. And I'm just over here working and hanging out with roommates and just kind of living my life.
And you were the favorite aunt.
I was a favorite aunt, yes.
Yes.
Still am.
Oh, okay.
So. Yes.
Well, 6 years later, you get married, and didn't work out.
Nope, it did not.
And you're very honest in the book. You talk about you're not quite sure why it didn't work out, and your first husband just basically told you one day, "I'm done."
Yeah. Yep. I was pretty blindsided, so it was kind of a lot to process.
Now, in the book, you talk about these things, but let's talk about it a little bit. How do you deal with this? How did you deal spiritually, getting to be 25, 26, and then you finally get married, and then the husband says, "I don't want this anymore. It's not what I want." How did you deal with it?
It was a lot of things, Some days there was the anger and the frustration and the grieving and just being mad. And other days it drove me to my knees to pray and ask for peace and strength to just get through it. Because that marriage did last for 6 years. So it was a good chunk of time, a good chunk of my life that I had dedicated to this relationship. And so it was a lot to process. And I think from experiences I had had from seeing other people that I knew who had gone through divorce and how they reacted, I saw the anger and the bitterness and the frustration kind of eat them up. Mm-hmm. And they became kind of a shell of themselves, and they were miserable and just not very happy. And I decided, I don't want that to be me. So what can I do to avoid that? How can I make the most of this situation? Even though it's a really crappy situation and I don't want to be in it and I don't wish this on anyone, what can I do to kind of step out of that? And so it was just a lot of prayer and self-reflection, but also just a lot of kind of attitude adjustments.
Okay.
Of just recognizing, hey, this is not a good space. I don't want to be this bitter, mean, hateful person. Let me look around at what I do have and try to make the most of the situation I've been given. But it was definitely a very conscious effort with, progress and then setbacks, because that cycle of grief is very real.
Yes.
You are going to step into acceptance and then anger, and then sometimes you're back at anger. You kind of cycle through it repeatedly. And so that's kind of what my journey looked like. It wasn't perfect by any means, but it was definitely healing.
So if my math is correct, you were over 30 when you were divorced.
I was.
Which
yes.
means you weren't in a single ward.
Correct. Yeah.
Which
yeah.
means you went to the ward where everyone's got families and children, and
Yep.
and you're the single sister.
Yep. And then you're in that place of, how do I fit in here? Is there a place for me here? Because I don't look like everybody else.
Well, episode 16, you talk about the power of the temple.
Yes. That was huge for me too.
Yeah.
And my divorce happened. It was an interesting timing too. Again, this is why my life is a sitcom. I can't plan these things, right? Like, I was getting separated and divorced, and I was going to the temple to rely on that spiritual boost of, hey, Heavenly Father, help me make sense of this. Like, how did I end up here? Why is this happening? Why me? Right. And so I went to the temple quite frequently just to feel that peace and try to make some sense of my life and figure out my next steps. And then COVID hit. So then the temples were closed. So then it was like, okay, how do I rely on that strength that I had from the temple and kind of keep having that experience so that I could also continue to move forward and heal? But definitely had some very healing moments within the temple where I felt, that overwhelming love and knowing that I was going to be okay, even though my whole world had just fallen apart.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, you finally meet someone.
Yeah.
And I'm always curious how somebody handles this in your situation. It's not like your first husband died. He just woke up one day and said, I'm done.
Yep.
And that's after 6 years of a marriage. And so now you meet somebody. There's got to be something in the back of your mind going, am I going to have the same experience?
Oh, for sure.
Is this somebody I can trust?
Uh-huh. Yeah, big time. and I experienced all of that. It was like, but it wasn't even learning how to trust another person. It was also learning how to trust myself again. Because I thought, oh man, look at the last time I made this huge decision about marriage and look how it ended. Yeah. It's just going to end that way again, right? And that's when the cynicism came out and the doubt and the frustration of, how can I trust myself? But when is the other shoe going to drop with this person? This is too good to be true. This can't be reality. Yes. And that was an inner struggle that I had for a long time when I first started dating my now husband, which is also why I friend zoned him so many times because I was scared. I thought this is too good to be true. This can't be real life. This person is actually honest with me and their actions are matching their words. Like, this is a trap. Right. It definitely felt like that as you're learning to build that trust again and figuring out who you are again after a divorce. It's a very, very weird headspace.
Yes, absolutely. So how many years have you been married now?
It will be 3 in October.
3 in October. And you discovered you married Mr. Perfect.
And not Mr. Perfect. No.
I thought that's how these stories end.
No, I think that's the misconception of the fairy tale, right? That we all think, hey, we're going to sign up for this perfect marriage, this perfect person. But the reality is, every marriage is imperfect, right? You have two imperfect people who are trying to make a relationship work. And I think the biggest thing I learned from my divorce is, is that person willing to go in the trenches with you? At the end of the day, do they have your back? Can you rely on them? And that, I think, is what can make a relationship successful, is that, you take these two imperfect people, but you're willing to work together and meet each other and do the hard work, because marriage is not just a happy sunshine roses all the time. There's real life mixed in there too.
Prince Charming doesn't exist.
Nope, he doesn't. And I believe I say that in my book too. I'm like, he's not out there. If we're looking for him, he's not out there.
You end with episode 24, Never Stop Growing, and it's evident that's what you've been doing. You continue to move on and continue to work on this marriage. And really, a marriage, it takes two people wanting to be Christ-like.
Yep.
And being able to forgive each other when one isn't Christ-like.
Yeah, so true.
And but that's what that sealing ordinance is about. But you got to have certain misgivings when, obviously, the first marriage was in the temple and it's for eternity, and then it's not.
Yep.
So, well, I started this off by wondering, well, how does this book apply to me? I mean, my listeners know that I'm in my second marriage. My first marriage was 38 years. My wife died of cancer, and I got to meet Amy, and very quickly after that, and we're going, I think, 17 years. Now, sometimes she listens to these podcasts, so I got to be careful. It might be 18, 17. Anyway, it's somewhere in there.
There you go, ballpark.
Women seem to be much better at math when it comes to anniversaries than the men are.
That makes sense, yeah.
But there was one thing in your book. It got to your first date with your what would soon be your Prince Charming, in quotes here, went for 10 hours.
Yes, it did.
And I have you beat.
Oh, hey, that's impressive.
My wife now, Amy, we had a date. It started at 8 o'clock in the morning for breakfast, and it ended somewhere around 11 o'clock at night.
Wow, there you go. That's great.
We went for walks. We walked through a mall. We had breakfast. We had lunch. We had dinner. And the Lord told me during that period of time that this is the one.
That's so great.
And so I thought, it can't be. I've only known her for 8 hours by now.
Right.
But anyway, it's worked out great, and she's a wonderful wife.
That's great.
So I think this book is not just for people who are struggling with the dating. I think this book is also for bishops and stake presidents and Relief Society presidents who have that marriage that they've been married now for 30 years and 40 years and forgot what it's like to date. And just to get a different perspective of what it's like being single for a long time, especially in a society, an environment where marriage is a big deal.
Yeah.
And so I really think that this is something that I would advise these church leaders to get the book and read it. And it's a wonderful read. It really is. It just flows along. And it is like watching a sitcom. And you just can't wait till episode 19 is coming next week. And it really reads very, very well. And you're very, very open.
Yeah, I tried to be.
Yeah, what you were experiencing. And I think your skills in journalism paid off.
Well, thank you.
Is there anything else about the book you would like to mention?
No, I mean, I think you nailed it on the head, right? Like, I've been asked that a lot of like, well, who is this book for? And it's been interesting as people have read it and given me feedback. They've said, kind of like you, like, how do I approach this? I've had a 30+ year marriage. How is this applicable to me? And when they say, well, I walked away with new things that I could learn about myself, right? It's kind of that, it's a continual journey to love yourself and to feel like you're enough and to feel like you have a place in the church, because we all have those feelings of insecurity. And so what do we do in those moments of insecurity or not feeling good enough? And so, if that's something that you've ever struggled with, wondering what your divine nature is or what your purpose is, I think this book can help you relate to that as well. Because like you said, I got pretty real and vulnerable as I wrote it about, what I've actually thought, what the journey was like, because I know I'm not alone. I know there are people out there who have had some of these same thoughts and feelings. And, if they want a friend to have them kind of ride along the journey with them, then pick up the book and read it. And hopefully it will be something that can help you to just recognize that you are enough and we're all God's children and we all have a purpose in this life.
I would imagine there were times you were typing away and tears were coming.
Oh, for sure.
In fact, maybe more than a few tears.
Yeah. Yep.
I can even imagine you had to stop a few times to just get your composure to get back to typing away.
Definitely did. I took, breaks quite a bit. And it was like it was a 10, 11 year process of me just writing down stories. And, I thought that once I was married, I thought, oh, great, now I can finish my book because I'm out of the dating scene. And then I would kind of write things in my first marriage as I remembered them. And then, it got to where, oh, just kidding, now I'm divorced. And so now there's a part 2 to this book. And so I think it came out when it needed to, but it was definitely just a labor of love as I just remembered things and would write them down. Initially, the draft was just one big Word document where I would just dump out my thoughts as I remembered them. And then it evolved into a book as I, pieced it together and made it make more sense sequentially.
Yeah. And this wasn't something you created over a 3-month period and then sent it to the publisher.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It took time, and it's very evident from the book. It's a great book. Now, where is it available?
So it is on cedarfort.com. You can buy it there, but it's also available on Amazon as well.
Okay. And Cedar Fort didn't tell me when it came out. When did it actually come out?
So it was released on March 12th.
Okay.
So it's been out a little over a month now. Right. And I'm also working on an audiobook version. So for those of you that are more audio listeners, stay tuned. Hopefully that will be released shortly as well.
Okay. Well, that takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it does.
And I assume it's you that's doing the audio.
It is. Yeah, it is. Okay. Yeah. So it's been interesting to try to edit it because, you don't always like hearing yourself as you're talking and hearing it back.
Yeah. That's very, very, very true. Well, thank you for being on the podcast. It's a great book. I encourage people to get it and read it and learn to be a better ministering brother or sister.
Well, thank you so much, Richard, for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, you have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Anjilee's book is available at cedarfort.com, deseretbook.com, and, of course, on Amazon. Your support means the world to us, and if you've enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to give it a thumbs up and share your uplifting comments. By doing so, you'll help others discover this podcast and join our growing community of listeners. Lastly, don't forget to explore the other podcast I host, The Busy Latter-day Saint. In each episode, I have the privilege of interviewing incredible members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from all around the world who share their personal experience and unique insights on Scripture study. The podcast is spiritually uplifting and a treasure trove of different approaches to studying the Scriptures. Thank you for listening.